Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
He was described as having stabbed his rival for the Tory party leadership in the front when Michael Gove decided to stand against fellow Brexiteer Boris Johnson last year, prompting Mr Johnson to abort his bid for the top job. He cemented his reputation as the most ruthless politician in Westminster. But has a new, softer, gentler, well, more cuddly side to Michael Gove emerged in recent months? Here's Elizabeth Glinker.
Take me outside, sit in a green garden.
From political assassin to puppy cuddler, it's quite a transformation. In the aftermath of the EU referendum, having squished the hopes and dreams of ally Boris Johnson, Mr Gove had become a villain of almost pantomime proportions.
You brought down David Cameron, then you brought down Boris Johnson. Some people are saying that you are a kind of political serial killer.
But against the odds, he's back, installed at DEFRA and championing all things bright and beautiful, all creatures great and small. A tactic borrowed, perhaps, from an old friend.
This idea of kind of green credentials is something from the Cameron playbook. It's what they did when the Conservatives were in opposition and David Cameron was really trying to find a way to show that his party was modernising. They had a slogan, I think, in the local council elections, which was vote blue, go green. He does seem genuinely happy. Part of the happiness, I think, is that he's back in cabinet and he has a remarkable change in fortunes if you think back to just after the EU referendum.
And it seems there's no issue too big or too small. In recent months, the Environment Secretary has waded into a row over the felling of trees in Sheffield, indicated his support for the reintroduction of beavers, and unveiled plans to legislate to protect elephants. It's not going unnoticed.
In the last 4 months under Michael Gove, we have seen a firework display of activity.
Michael Gove's comeback is a quite staggering phenomenon. A year ago, he was reviled as a traitor, the man who'd done in David Cameron and Boris Johnson. Now, here he is as the Environment Secretary, who is showing the wider world that the Conservatives do actually care about the environment and doing with tremendous brio and adopting and winning plaudits from all sorts of environmentalists. It's a quite staggering transformation. It has occurred partly because within the cabinet there are really very few rivals for our attention.
In a parliament beset by Brexit woes, fellow Conservative MPs seem to have jumped on board the eco-charm offensive, this week even managing to coordinate their social media reactions to the BBC's Blue Planet. Divided by almost everything else, Mr Gove seems to have hit on something the British public really can unite on.
Well, we're joined now by the Green Party's co-leader Jonathan Bartley and the Conservative MP Henry Smith of the Conservative Animal Welfare Foundation. Welcome to both of you. Jonathan Bartley, are you pleased by Michael Gove's support for all things environmental?
I think, credit where it's due. I'm under no illusions. This is a bit of a rebrand. He's getting quite cuddly. What they've done on plastics, the consultation over a tax, on microbeads, phasing out coal power by hopefully 2025. These are all steps in the right direction. Go from maybe a 2 out of 10 to a 4 out of 10.
Right.
So, this is good stuff.
Do you think it's genuine?
I don't think you can take it as genuine when there's so much lacking around climate change, which is the big issue. I mean, you can try and sort out the seas, but the biggest threat to the seas is climate change. And the government's clean growth plan should have been a green print for the future and was actually a blueprint for underachievement. It's going to miss out on the 4th and 5th carbon budgets. There's still investment in fracking. There's no action to tackle airport expansion and tackle the frequent flyers. So there's a massive hole in the government's agenda.
Right. I mean, when it comes to Michael Gove, when did the Damascene conversion happen, Henry, when it came to the environment?
Well, I think what we're seeing is real tangible measures coming forward in terms of policies. There's a new animal welfare bill that was announced the other day, which will increase sentences for cruelty up to 5 years. Jonathan's already been talking about the banning of plastic microbeads to help save the ocean environment, the introduction of CCTV in slaughterhouses to increase welfare. That's something that I raised in Parliament a couple of years ago. I'm very pleased to see that as well. Recognising sentience in UK law, which is stronger than the Article 13 of the Lisbon Treaty.
Although the government ran into quite a lot of trouble over that. Is it that that has made ministers sit up and think we do need to at least appear if not believe in things that are environmentally important to the public?
Well, I've been one of the co-chairs of the All-Party Parliamentary Animal Welfare Group for many years, and I know that many of these policies have been in train for some time. Maybe the presentation of them has improved in recent months, and I think that is very necessary, but these are real, tangible policies that are coming through, and I think we have seen more advancement in some environmental and animal protection policies in the last few months than we have seen in many years previously under all shades of government.
Let's not forget that was a screeching U-turn from the government because of what Caroline Lucas, my co-leader, did in the House of Commons on sentience. You know, and this is about public pressure. You know, there's been public pressure building for years and years and years. There's some great NGOs that are doing great work. The Green Party's been setting the agenda too, and the government has been forced into this position. I know it's been carrying out polling, and these issues have been going up and up the agenda, and so they know they've got to respond to them.
Right, but at the same time, do you accept that there have been tangible changes and improvements to things like animal welfare?
Oh, it does seem that they're heading in the right direction, but you know, if you don't tackle climate change, you know, our oceans are going to be devastated. The coral reefs are going to be destroyed, and so the big question, you know, it's really not addressing. It's a bit like, you know, a broken arm putting in a sling, but not putting a cast on it. You know, you're not really dealing with the fundamental long-term issues.
Right. Well, what about when it comes to climate change, Henry Smith? Is that just rhetoric if long-term targets in cutting carbon emissions are not going to be reached?
Well, already this government is absolutely committed to the Paris Agreement, and just again the other day the Prime Minister was in France to restate the importance of this country playing its part in ensuring that carbon emissions are reduced. And just on sentience,
this clean growth plan, it won't hit. You know, even in the government's plan, which is supposed to be legally binding to meet those carbon targets, you know, the plan says clearly it won't hit the 4th and 5th carbon budgets. It will fail by its own admission.
I mean, I think this country is leading in terms of.
But it will fail. You accept that?
I don't accept that we're going to fail in those targets. We're heading very much in the right direction. Yes, there are huge challenges ahead, but I think we have a real determination. And I just wanted to come back on sentience. Let's be careful about what the Lisbon Treaty said on sentience. It only applied to EU law, and the new animal welfare bill coming in will apply to all law, all UK law across the board. And of course, the EU Charter on animal sentience allowed bullfighting, allowed foie gras production. The single market means that we cannot ban the live export of animals for slaughter as well, or the importation of cruel products like foie gras or furs. So once we leave the single market, which I believe we should be doing, I think we can really increase animal welfare standards.
Do you believe that? I mean, this idea that actually there are practices that are forced onto the UK, if you like, via the European Union when it comes to animal welfare will be improved in post-Brexit Britain?
And by the government's own admission, we'll lose about 1/3 of the environmental protections, environmental regulations.
But on animal welfare,
we'll go further. We'll go further, and we'll be free to do that on Brexit.
See, the problem is when you look at the wider issue, it's clear that the government is failing in such the big issues. That how can we have confidence in these small issues?
Well, it's not failing at the moment in terms of cutting carbon emissions. It is true when you look further down the line, as you say, and further into the future, they aren't going to hit those targets.
No, look, it's getting a whole new industry up and running, overriding local communities and their wishes over fracking. It's just produced £2.3 billion by the Chancellor's own admission to invest in North Sea oil. It's not investing in home insulation, which could be cutting carbon emissions, could be cutting fuel poverty. You know, it just goes on and on and on. It's failing and failing and failing.
Giza, you worked with Michael Gove and you know him. Do you believe that this change, this conversion to protecting the environment is genuine?
I do, and what I think is really telling is that what he is showing in his department, which is not which is where he's got a say as his cabinet post, that Brexit does not need to paralyse government, that Secretaries of State can actually start to use those new gained powers. And the suggested legislation, whether it is live export of animals, which we've been against, whether it's some of the cosmetic testing, he is showing that you can make the political weather and make it better.
And because he's now deemed to be such a ruthless politician, do you think he is the man to push it? Do you see him as ruthless as he is portrayed?
Well, as politician to politician, this is about power and making decisions, and I think he's exercising his cabinet post in an area where we can end up with new legislation, with a new freedom, effectively.
Is he to be trusted?
He's getting things done.
Yeah, he's getting things done, and I worked well with him on the campaign.
How can we have any confidence when, over years and years and years, this government has failed in air pollution targets set by the European Union, risking huge, great fines, have to be dragged kicking and screaming through the courts just to deal with the basic stuff that does affect our population right here, right now, when it could be taking tangible action on air pollution? It's killing, there's air pollution-related deaths of 40,000 a year.
I remember under the Labour government, we were leading the campaign on protecting the environment. And you can...
Yeah, we're talking about this government, though.
Yeah, well, in this government, as it is getting new powers on the animal welfare, he is making those changes. Now, that shouldn't stop other cabinet ministers to do the same, but just on this narrow question as to are we using those newly gained powers to actually have better standards than before?
The fact is, on these issues, we need international cooperation. It's never been so important. You can't tackle these just within your own context, your national border.
Of course, there needs to be international cooperation, but it also takes responsible countries to lead and show the way. And I think that the United Kingdom can do that far better.
It's a monumental failure of leadership from this government on just absolutely right across the board on climate change. I mean, just even if it can't produce a clean growth plan, its strategy that's supposed to be legally binding to meet its carbon targets. What leadership is it going to
But to actually achieve the things that you've said, Gisela, are you convinced by Michael Gove? You didn't seem to be sure that you did trust him to carry these things out. Is he to be trusted?
No, I do. I mean, he takes on the job. It was a portfolio we didn't have before. Let's just take another example. Yesterday, I think the new fisheries quotas were being agreed. And Michael has done a lot of work in the run-up of saying, what will the return of powers of fishing and agriculture mean? How do you have that allocation? How do you deal with that in the UK's interest? That's all you can expect from an effective politician at this stage.
Right. Is he ambitious that he still wants to go for being Prime Minister one day?
Look, I'm not here to speak on behalf of other people, what their political ambitions might be.
Would you like to see an environmentalist be someone like Michael Gove, be at number 10?
Well, I think we've seen an environmentalist in David Cameron at number 10. Under Theresa May, Michael Gove as Secretary of State for the Environment is really forging ahead with environmental and animal welfare protection. So I think we do already have a government that is led by somebody who is a committed environmentalist, as she was restating, the Prime Minister was restating in Paris just the other day.
Do you think Michael Gove would be any stronger in standing up to Donald Trump? Because all I can see is, with the trade deals that are going to come post-Brexit, a race to the bottom in terms of environmental standards, in terms of regulation around food, around animals.
I think this country's been showing leadership in terms of both standing up within the European Union and as we're leaving the European Union, and standing up to Donald Trump when he is doing things that are not good for our planet.
Just before you go, how did you feel about your 11 rebels last night?
Well, I was very disappointed, and I wasn't so much disappointed for the Prime Minister or the government. I was disappointed for the 17.4 million British people, the largest majority ever in a poll in this country, who voted for Brexit, and the 58% of my Crawley constituents who did as well.
Do you think they betrayed those people?
Yes.
And should they be deselected, as Nadine Dorries called for?
Look, selection processes are up to local parties to decide, but I do think they've let down the British people and frustrated or sought to frustrate the democratic will of the majority of the people.
Thank you, gentlemen.